So to start, is bilingualism related to intelligence? Is there any evidence for that? Second question, what cognitive skills are enhanced by the languages that you speak? Let's start with the first question. Even though nowadays we believe that bilingualism is good, and that's why we teach children very early, as early as we can, new languages, actually this idea, it was not the idea that people had during the 60s, the 60s last century. Before the 60s, people believed that bilingualism, it was a condition that the bilinguals had some kind of handicap. They call it like a language handicap. They suffer from confusion, language confusion. They believed that actually this was bad. So when they tried to test the children on intelligence, they found that bilinguals, the score was lower than monolingual people. So they didn't recommend people to be bilingual. So what happened after the 60s? These two authors, Phil and Lambert, did a review of all these previous studies, and what they found was that all these studies had very important flaws. And to say just only two important flaws, one is some studies just they decided whether the person was bilingual or not just by looking at the surname, without looking whether the person spoke the language, which language they spoke at home. Another one is that they didn't control for socio-economic status, and socio-economic status is associated with intelligence. So there's some variables that need to be controlled. So Phil and Lambert did a study where they tried to control all these variables that can provoke or induce to some findings that are not really reliable. And here I show you some of the tasks that they used in order to measure intelligence. All these tasks here refer to verbal intelligence. So one of the tasks that you can use to measure verbal intelligence can be this one, similarities. One example of the task that the psychologists use to test your intelligence could be to ask the child, in what ways are work and school alike? In these kind of questions, what they're doing is to measure conceptual thinking. Another one could be vocabulary. What does breakfast mean? What does anything? And what they are trying to measure is language development. The next one is about information. How many legs does the dog have? The child will respond. Basically, what they are measuring is word knowledge. And finally, comprehension. What should you do if you find a wallet in a shop? I'm sure you're thinking. Okay, so what they're measuring here is judgment and common thinking. What would you do, right? Like what would most of the people would do, common sense. Let's continue with the next tasks that they use. I must say that they use more than these ones. These are just examples, okay? In order to measure non-verbal intelligence, they use tasks like the rival. That you must be familiar with that if you have been in psychology. So basically, you see some patterns, and then you have to find what is the logic that follows, and then you choose one of these options. Okay? This is measuring general intelligence. The next one is picture completion. It's an example, as I said, there are many other tasks. And they show kids some pictures that there's something missing in it. And the kids, what they have to either point it out, like point what is missing, or they can say it. And what here you are measuring is attention to detail. Another example could be the picture arrangement task. In this task, what you do is you present different cards with different pictures to a kid. These pictures actually explain the story, but they are all mixed up. So the child has to put them in order, and explain what is the story behind these pictures. And what this is measuring is reasoning ability. So as you can see here, all this is non-verbal intelligence. So what were the findings after they controlled for everything? Okay, I'll say that these kids were monolingual French and bilingual French-English in Montreal, in Canada. What they found is that bilinguals overall perform better in both verbal and non-verbal tasks. And this is quite surprising because they expected that they will do worse in verbal, And non-verbal intelligence would be more or less the same for monolinguals and bilinguals. But actually, it seems that language helps even for intelligence that has nothing to do with verbal information. After that, many studies have been done, and overall, they say that bilingualism seems to enhance these features: mental flexibility. So children are flexible in the way they think. It also enhances linguistic awareness, that means how the language works. And to make concepts, to think about things, how the things are related, for example, the fork and the spoon. But the question is, why? Why bilingualism will enhance intelligence? Well, some authors like Bilingualism, they have found that bilinguals seem to have a better attentional system, better or more attentional control. They can control better their attention. And this is quite surprising. The question is why they will have a better attentional system. The reason that they say is because bilinguals have to use both languages. And although we believe it or not, when we're using one language, the other language is active simultaneously. So there's some proof of this. Yes, there's many studies, and I'm going to present one study that we have conducted here at University with my student Andre. And in this study, we wanted to show that both Indonesian and English, these were Indonesian English bilinguals, both languages are activated when they are only thinking in English. So how we did it? Okay, what we did is very simple task. We showed words like uncle, aunt, nephew, niece on the screen. The participant, the only thing that they have to do is to decide whether the word referred to a male or to a female. That's it. So uncle, they would respond male, aunt, female, nephew, male, niece, female. Very easy. But our hypothesis was that if they were activating Indonesian, something will happen. Actually, we manipulated some of the words. We see here gender specific. This means that uncle has a word that's called paman in Indonesian, that means exactly uncle, so it's a male thing. Okay. Aunt, bibi, a particular word for female, for auntie. Okay. But look at this kind of words. In Indonesian, nephew and niece both can be translated as a keponakan. They use the same word. Obviously, if they need to differentiate, eventually they will use something behind in order to tell is a nephew male, is a nephew female, somehow. Will be the translation, the rough translation. But if you ask them directly, they will translate like that, with one word. And it's the word that they will use to say as a general, either female or male, nephew or niece. So what we did is to try to measure how long they take when we ask them to respond male or female to English words. And what we found is that here you see we differentiated people with low proficiency and high proficiency in English, but we are not much interested in this differentiation. We were interested in this middle. So words that they have like a male parallel word in Indonesia were responded faster, quicker, than words that were more ambiguous, more general. So what is happening there? Our hypothesis is that the person one is trying to decide whether uncle is male or female, okay, or nephew is male or female, probably is translating. So the person is saying nephew, and then will immediately access to the Indonesian word in order to understand keponakan. And keponakan is, okay, can be both. So then I have to think twice. Somehow. It takes a little bit longer to decide, right? Otherwise, they would have responded all with the same speed. So this shows somehow that even when you're thinking in one language, there's some interference, I would say. Both languages get activated. And more evidence, and this is easier maybe to see, is that word retrieval. That means, like, for example, if you see an object, to say the name of the object, bottle, microphone, bottle, whatever, screen. Word retrieval is slower for bilinguals than for monolinguals, and there's no reason for that. For that, when the explanation is that you have the two languages activated, even if you are now thinking or speaking in English, but both languages are activated. So it takes a little bit longer for you to come up with the word. as well as more tip of the tongue states in bilinguals than monolinguals. Again, showing that there's some competition in the retrieval. Both languages compete. So said that, we were talking about this attentional control. So we have two languages that are activated all the time and then they compete, right? Bilinguals continuously need to select language, avoid interference from one language to the other language, and switch between languages sometimes. So all this seem to have developed this attentional capacity. And if you are interested here, there are some other papers, and there are many more, that explain that this could be the case, even in infants. Since there's attentional control, even babies who cannot they don't speak yet, they seem to have more attentional capacity than children who are monolingual. And this will be this paper, 2012. So we can say, although this is interference, we see that there's some attentional control capacity that is enhanced by bilingualism. And bilingualism, we can say overall, I believe, is positive because bilingual children learn that language is a tool. Things can be called in different ways. The same concept can have different meanings. This makes children to think more about the structure of the language, be more aware that the language is a tool that you can manipulate, and this is called Meta-Linguistic Awareness. So it enhances this capacity to think about language and how language works. And then we will see that also this facilitates understanding or learning another new language, because you are more able to see the different rules of different languages. If you see this sentence, if you ask a very young child, which one is more like a cat, can or hat? You will say cat, right? Small child usually will say can, because they sound more similar. Bilingual children start saying that this cat earlier than monolingual children. Why? Because they have more capacity for making these associations. They just think, okay, it's not about the sound, it's about the meaning. Let's see. Another point here. Again, is positive because this ability to attend to control, to manipulate different languages, this develops these attentional control skills. And when I'm talking about attentional control, basically I'm talking about the ability to ignore distracting information. So it's not attention overall, but it's this capacity to only focus on what you want to focus and ignore whatever is not important for you at this moment. And this attention control expertise transfers to non-linguistic tasks too. And I'll give you an example. You say to a child, let us call a dog cow. Does this cow give milk? Yeah, you're thinking, right? Some of you are still thinking. Well, for a monolingual child, this is a very difficult question. They will say yes. Because a cow can only be a cow and a dog can only be a dog. You cannot change the names. They cannot get out of this idea. A dog always has to be a dog. It couldn't be called cow. It's impossible. Bilinguals, they have the capacity to split up this idea. So they will respond earlier that, okay, this cow gives milk. They will say no. You're still thinking. Okay. I'm joking. So this attentional control expertise, as I said, transferred to non-linguistic tasks. This is a reasoning task. And here, as you see, you also have to avoid interference. All these figures look somehow similar. There's some squares and circles, so you have to ignore the information that is not relevant and just try to find out which one is the one that is correct. So you see how this ability can be transferred not only to language, but also to other kind of tasks. And 3, bilingualism delays the onset of symptoms of Alzheimer's disease for 4 years. Unfortunately, it doesn't change the rate of progression. One of the explanations could be, as I said, that bilinguals develop this attentional control. And one of the main features of Alzheimer's, or the first symptoms that you see, is the other way, that this person cannot attend, lose we call it executive dysfunction, lose this ability to concentrate. So probably what is happening is that because the child has grown up bilingual, it has developed more attentional network in the brain, in the cortex. So probably the symptoms are not seen until a little bit later. So it protects somehow on not on the Alzheimer's to happen, but at least to delay it a little bit. So some conclusions about bilingualism and intelligence. Under specific conditions, bilingualism is beneficial for intelligence, but which conditions? Bilinguals must have a minimum level of competency in second language. So it's not that because you learn Russian in one week, it's going to make a difference. Okay? So you have to have like a minimum level of competency. And we will see that some people say it's not even competency, it's literacy, being able to read and write. We will talk about that a little bit later. Second one, positive attitudes towards bilingualism. I didn't show here, but in the study that I talk about these kids from Montreal, the parents who have positive attitudes for bilingualism, as well as if the kids have positive attitudes for bilingualism, it will make it much easier for the child to learn a second language. So it's very important, these attitudes, in order to learn a foreign language. And this second language, again, needs to be nourished, needs to be fed with, experience with playgroup, with reading, etc., etc. Otherwise, all these benefits will not be evident. Let's continue with my line of research. And let me explain first this. Okay, it has been found that literacy, and that's why I put it here in italics, literacy in both first language and second language has a generalized positive effect on third language acquisition. So it's not about you know two languages or you can speak two languages, it's not enough. In order for these benefits to be obvious, you need to be able to read and write, or at least read or write either of these two languages. Some of the explanations that they say, basically what they're saying here is that if you speak two languages, you will learn a third language much easier than if you were monolingual. Some of the explanations given, for example, Sam says, obviously if you have learned a second language, then what happens is that you know how to study a third language. You know which strategies to use, you know how to approach it, So this experience obviously is going to help you to learn a foreign language. But I'm going to talk a little bit more because do all languages promote the same skills? This is the question. The question is, how do the language you use affect the learning of words in a new language? So here it says, as long as you speak two languages, you will learn easily, or at least easier than a monolingual, another third language. But here for me the question, my research is, well, it depends, let's see which language you speak and how they help the learning of a third language. Let's see previous findings. Koshanskaya and Marian, what they did is they got a group of monolingual English speakers, a group of English-Spanish speakers, and a group of English Mandarin speakers, and they asked them to learn new words in an imaginary language. And the results were that the English, Spanish, and English and Mandarin bilinguals both did equally well and better than the English monolinguals. So they concluded that if you are bilingual, it's easier for you to learn new languages, probably because you have a wider phonemic repertoire. That means that you know more sounds, so for you it's easier to capture new sounds in a new language. But let's see the second study. In this study, they used Mandarin-English bilinguals, English-French bilinguals, and English monolinguals. So that means these are biscriptal, they have two writing systems, while these two groups, they only have one writing system, the alphabetic system. And instead of asking them to memorize words, oral words, they ask them to memorize new written characters. So just to give you an example, they use this character, imaginary character, and they say this means movie. So they wanted to know which of these groups will learn better the characters. And what they found is that the Mandarin English bilinguals, they learn better characters than the English-French or the English monolinguals, indicating that it depends on what you are learning, and it's not just bilingualism per se, but it's also the language background that you have. So if you have Mandarin, it will help you to learn probably a different system of characters. So what happens in Singapore? It's just the perfect place to study bilingualism, right? Because we have alphabetic languages, for example, English and Malay. Alphabetic languages are set to promote phonological awareness, and to understand phonological awareness means this capacity to manipulate sounds, to be able to detect, manipulate sounds. Just two examples on our phonological awareness task. You can say to the child, say auto. Now say auto without saying do. Okay, for us it's easy, but for a child maybe a little bit difficult. Or what is the first sound of dog? So the child will have to say OD or something like that. Children who grow up with alphabetic languages, they are very quick at getting this phonological awareness. And the same alphabetic language promotes verbal memory, like means memory for sounds. But let's say logographic language. Okay, I just Google and put the most strokes in Chinese, and this came up, okay? And none of my students knew what it meant, okay? So we had to look together what it meant. So this is an example of how complicated it can be a character. So this requires a lot of visual memory, okay? So those who have studied Chinese know that you have to practice and practice and practice. So it's not only about the quantity of material, the complexity of it, but it's also here to the character on how you write it. So you know that if you learn Chinese, you have to write the characters always in the same order, and they teach you to do it in the same order. So pam, pam, pam. So it's about order. You have to memorize quantity, you have to memorize order, and also the location where things have to be in relation to the order in order to be a nice character. Okay? So it's not the idea here is that this promotes visual memory, and there are many studies that show that this is the case, that Japanese and Chinese promote visual memory. They have better memory than people who only speak alphabetic languages. What happened with Tamil? This is also a very interesting language. Tamil is alpha-syllabic, and that means that it's syllabic, but also differentiates between consonants and vowels. And so, you correct me if I'm wrong, but this means ka, ki, hu. So the skeleton, okay, of here, and all these things indicate the vowel. So the vowel can be either on top, okay, embedded with the consonant. So it's alpha-syllabic because you see only the syllable, but within it is embedded the vowel. Okay, so here you have another example. This is la, this is le. But what is interesting in here is that the vowel, in this case la, you put it behind. But in Tamil, to say le, the vowel goes in front. So this requires some kind of reorganization, also memorization. And here you have two other syllables, so this will be pronounced like ka, it's like sa, something like that. So in this case, these sounds completely different, but they are very similar visually. So phonological awareness, probably yes, this language development is not much done. So I assume that it should promote phonological awareness because it's an alpha-syllabic language, so you have to understand that ka, ki, ku, what, you know, that is a consonant and a vowel. Again, verbal memory. The idea is here, does this promote visual memory? It's not very clear. On one hand, there's some rules here that you have to learn and memorize, but still, you see, it's not so complex like Chinese. So maybe it's in between. So just to wrap up again, English Malay bilinguals in Singapore, they use alphabetic language, English Mandarin alphabetic logographic language, English Tamil alphabetic alpha-syllabic language. That means that these have only one system and these have two different systems. So what I did is I was interested to know, me and Shakti, we were interested to know that whether or not different bilinguals will learn characters, Okay, this is centered on characters. Who will do the best? We have some hypotheses that basically the Chinese speakers will do better, probably because they have more visual memory. But what happened with the Tamil speakers? We don't know. So what we asked them is to create some tasks. This is the pseudo-character task. What we're measuring here is the learning capacity for logographic language. And this is one of the examples. So the participant had to study characters with no meaning. We just were interested in the visual capacity. So we said this is a new language, you just have to learn the characters. And during the recognition task, what we did is to present this or this. And they had to then say, yes, I studied it. No, I didn't study it. So it requires quite it's not easy, right? After you see several, and total 24. So it's not an easy task. Let's see about the spoken words. Here I'm interested to know whether the different groups will learn differently oral language. So this capacity to differentiate sounds. So I presented words, for example, madolos, and during the recognition, I said either madolos or matolos. It's very subtle, very similar. So it's not easy. So it requires some kind of phonological awareness, be able to discriminate sounds. Let's continue. This is for you to understand how I did the experiment with the characters. So they see the character for 10 seconds, then another character for 10 seconds, okay, 12 in one block, and then I do the recognition task. So if I show the same, you have to say yes, I studied that one, and if I show a different one, you see the difference here, you have to say no, I didn't study that one. Only one stroke or only one, okay, detail. And for the words, it was something like that. So they hear the word retibla, 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 a little bit slower. And roquitor, roquitor, roquitor. And then after that, if I say retibla, they have to say yes, I studied that word. If I say roditor, okay, it's the difference between k and g. It's also again, very, try to get letters that are a little bit difficult for Chinese speakers. Whether they have to say no. More tasks. I use the digit symbol coding. This is a typical task that is used in the intelligent tests, but I changed it a little bit, so it's not exactly the same. But the purpose was the same, to measure visual perception, short-term memory, learning ability, and psychomotor skills. Psychomotor means how fast you can write, how good you are with your hands. In this case, writing. What they have to do, they are taught, they are shown that 5 is the symbol, 6 is the symbol, 9 is the symbol, and then after that, I show just the numbers, and they have to fill up the symbols. So the more symbols you can fill up in 2 minutes, the better you are, because there's a moment you don't need to look anymore, you just write it fast. That means that you're very good at writing and learning. I also use the backward digit span. In the backward digit span, what I'm measuring is the capacity to imagine and transform information, and also memory span in general. In this task, the participant hears a series of numbers, for example, 6, 1, and then the participant has to say back, 1, 6. And this goes increasing on numbers and numbers. So 2 numbers, 3 numbers, 4 numbers, becomes quite difficult. But the idea is that the person has to keep it in mind, and then he has to transform the information to go backwards. And this is not easy. Let's continue with the next task. What I ask them is, I show them these matrices, and the participants, what they have to do is to try to memorize the lines, how many lines. So they see this matrix on the screen, and later paper, and then they have to replicate the same pattern. And again, it started very simple, only 2 lines, then 3 lines, 4 lines, 9 lines, and then just the participants already want to stop, okay? And finally, this is about capacity, and this is about dynamic matrix, is about spatial memory and rote learning. What we do, instead of showing the red lines at once, we show them like in a sequence. Okay, so they see one line, it disappears, another line disappears, and then they have to tell me in which order they saw it. Just to have an idea, they saw something similar like this for 2 seconds. No, this is 1 second. But this is the illusion that they have, that they move. So this is sometimes on and off, like a neon light. And after that, this will be a hypothetical answer. So they said, I saw this first, then this one, then this one, then this one. And here you see they have to maintain the sequence. So it's movement, memory for movement. Let's see the results, what we found. Let's start with the first one, with the pseudo characters. And this is the capacity to learn characters. Overall, as we expected, English Chinese did very high. And let me clarify, this is not a percentage. Okay, this is another measure that is called discrimination measure. A 0 means no discrimination, whatever. No discrimination at all. Okay, more than 0 means a little bit. So it's not a percentage. It's just a measure of discrimination. 0 means no discrimination. They cannot learn at all characters. Here we see that the best were the English Chinese speakers. They could really learn better the characters, but no differences between English and Malay. Malay and Tamil speakers. We expected that maybe the Tamil would have more visual memory, but we didn't find this. Probably, as we said, probably Chinese is really more complex and requires more memorization than Tamil. About learning words, sounds, no difference. Although it seems a little bit higher here and there, but this was not significantly different. That means that all are equally good at learning words just by sound. Let's continue with the visual perception abilities. Again, okay, this is digit symbol coding, is that remember they have a symbol and a number, and they write as fast as possible. They do better. And this is also, as I said, psychomotor skills, how good you are at writing. Probably Chinese requires quite a speed to write in Chinese. So probably that's why they also score better in this task. We also have the task measuring visual spatial imaging, the capacity to reorganize the information. Again, Chinese did better overall. This has a lot of sense. You have to think that when the Chinese have to write, if let's say you speak alphabetic language, you just, by the sound you can write it down, even if you don't know exactly how to spell it. But if you have to write Chinese, you really need to know how to write it. Because you know the Chinese character doesn't give you any cue on how it has to be written. Or you know the character or you don't know. For alphabetic languages, you may not know exactly how to write it, but by the sound you can guess. So it may require a lot of memorization. About capacity, visual memory capacity, again, they did slightly better. And for the dynamic, this spatial memory, put things in order, put it in a sequence. Again, English, Chinese did better. So some conclusions, okay? Going back to the first part that I said, is bilingualism seems to facilitate the language. The type of languages of bilingual users promotes different skills. So Chinese may promote this skill to memorize, and therefore maybe it's easier for them to learn Japanese or the languages that are characters. While other languages that are alphabetic may promote more languages that are like French, that are alphabetic. And as I said, logographic language seems to promote visual spatial memory. Although the results support previous research, I mean, it's not the first study that shows that Chinese promotes visual memory. Obviously, more replications are needed. So we need more samples. And once you know that this happened twice or 3 times, is when you can say this is a real effect. But we are in the process. And also, I have collected some data in Australia with monolingual speakers. So I have to reanalyze and see altogether whether or not monolinguals are worse. Okay? We don't know. We have to check it out. Okay? So, said that, you may be interested in bilingualism and age of acquisition. So what will happen if we had not been exposed to language? Okay? This is difficult to find, but there are real cases. There are cases of extreme language deprivation. And example, you will find a lot of information in internet videos, because this is during the 70s, so there's videos on that. Jenny's case, this girl was found when she was 13 years, 7 months, and she had been tied to just a room in a chair, in a room, locked in a room, since she was 20 months old, and she was rescued. So Jenny, when she was rescued, she only could speak 2 words, and the words were "stop it" and something like "no more," basically, 4 words. But what I mean is that she couldn't speak basically nothing. Comprehension, she could only understand the word "sorry." So it's quite dramatic. That means that if a child is not exposed to language, the child will not be able to speak. But that's the thing, that what happened when they try to teach her how to speak. This is the interesting part, right? For the psycholinguists, see what happens if you have not been exposed to language. Will you be able to learn how to speak? Well, Jenny could learn hundreds of words eventually, but she would never was able to construct complex sentences. It was a language that it was not natural language. So if you're not exposed to language, when you're an adult, you will have problems to learn. So it seems to be that your brain has to be exposed in order for you to learn languages. Another case could be deaf children. So deaf children, there are different scenarios. The first scenario is that they are born with deaf parents, so they start doing sign language, so that means that they develop language. You have another scenario where the deaf child is born from hearing parents. In this case, it will happen that the child, once is 6 years old, goes to a school, a special school, and learns how to use sign language. And you have the third scenario where the child is a deaf child, where the parents are hearing parents, and because there's no school, they live in a rural area, whatever reason, the child or the person learns how to use sign language when he's an adult. So what happens if they are not exposed to language? Okay, we have this scenario. The first one is deaf and can use sign language. The second one learns the sign language very young, and the third one, he learns language when he's already an adult. It seems that the adult is the one who will have problems again. Okay? So if you are a deaf child but you are exposed to sign language, this child can also learn later on English or whatever language, that is a second language. When a person learns sign language when he's already old, we'll have problems for the first one, for the sign language, and to learn any other language, in this case English, for example. So it's very important to be exposed, and this is the main variable that will make somebody be able to speak or to learn a foreign language. So what age is the most appropriate to start learning a foreign language? I'm going to show you one study, and then from there maybe we can discuss and see what is the ideal age. In this Johnson and Newport study, where they employed 46 Korean, Chinese, or Chinese L1, that means first language, was either Korean or Chinese, and they arrived to the US. The sample, some of them arrived as very young, others arrived when they were already 39 years old. So you see different ages of arrival to the US. All of them had university degree, and they had been in US, immersed in English for at least 5 years. And what they asked them is to judge whether or not sentences were grammatically correct or not. So what they sell at the corner store, so the person will have to say incorrect. Susan is making some cooking for we, incorrect, right? So they have to judge grammaticality. And let's see the results. Again, this is the age of arrival, and here is when they arrive about 3 years old. Some of them arrived when they were as young as 3 years old, until here some of them arrived when they were 16 years old. And this is the score. So there were 276 sentences, and you see more or less the trending here. The trending here shows that somehow the earlier you come to the country, so that means that the earlier you are exposed to the second language, the better will be your final attainment. That means that the better you will be in that language. Another thing you can see here that somehow is flat until you are 7 or 8 years old. After 7 to 8 years old, it seems that the older you go to the country, the worse will be the language. You see the trend? let's continue here. This is people who arrive at 17, okay, until 39. And look, this is interesting because here we have some people that are very good and people who they came earlier, they came younger, and they are worse. You see? So what is this telling us? It's telling us that, yeah, it may be that age has something to do. So if you are very young, eventually you will speak like a native speaker. But this is not the whole story, because we have people here who came with 20 plus years old and are doing better than people that came only with 10 years old. So why? We will see some of the variables that may have been affected, that could have affected these levels of proficiency. Before that, which kind of variables can affect levels of proficiency, I must say that although age seems very important, we also have to consider that there are some cases of people who are older learners of foreign language and eventually they achieve native-like type of speaking, okay, in the second language. Some studies said that 5% can reach this level of final attainment. That means that people cannot differentiate whether the person is a second language speaker or is a first language, is a native speaker. Some other studies will say it's up to 15%. And not only that, there are also cases of young second language learners, that means people who started learning very early, that never attained native-like proficiency. So there's one study that we compared Spanish, English, young people who came when they tested them, they were older, but they came very young to US, and Vietnamese. They compared Vietnamese, okay, with also Spanish speakers, and what they found is that at the end, the Spanish speakers were more native-like than the Vietnamese, even if they came with the same age to the US. One of the explanations is that also one variable that we have to take into account is how different are the languages that you come with. So if you speak Vietnamese, it's very different from English. So it's going to be more difficult for the child eventually than if you come with another phonetic language like Spanish. Okay? So it depends also which language you come with in first place. It's going to make a difference. Some conclusions about age acquisition. Early languages experiences are critical to learn language throughout life. So if you are exposed to two languages since you are very young, this is going to, again, make it easier for you to learn a third language. Superior second language attainment in young children, is superior second language attainment in young children than young adults or adults. And the explanation, as I said before, is one of the reasons could be brain plasticity. When you are very young, your connections in the brain are still not formed. So you may dedicate more brain tissue to language. When you are an adult, already all these connections are done and formed, so probably there's no more connections to make for the new language. However, some adults can attain native-like levels of proficiency in second language. Although most of these studies, they think more about your capacity to write or to read. Pronunciation, accent always tend to be compromised. So even if people are very or reach native-like levels, sometimes pronunciation is the most difficult to attain. So as I said to you, remember the graph that they showed that some people came very late to the US, but they were very good in English. So we saw that age is important, as we said, because brain plasticity, but there's some factors that may affect the fact that maybe you came late but you still are good. One of the factors could be socio-psychological reasons. That means that some people may decide to keep their accent. Maybe because of the community, maybe to be part of that community. It could be, imagine if you're a chef, okay? And you're a French chef who lives in the US, probably you want to keep your accent, right? If you're in fashion, maybe Italian. Right? If you're in the mafia, maybe Russian. So, and you see, there's some reasons why some people will also not decide not to, change. And also different input. That means that the language that adults receive is slightly different from the children. Children are taught sometimes with this, what we call mothers, and say, really? Really? You speak slow, you pronounce very clearly. This is not the input that the adults will receive. It will be a little bit weird, right, if people try to talk to us like that. So it may happen that all these things affect your final attainment. Another variable is aptitude. What is aptitude? Some researchers will say that the aptitude for language is the capability to have this or ability for phonemic coding. Again, phonemic coding is about distinguishing phoneme sounds, be able to memorize sounds. The capacity to do language or the ability of language analysis. That means the capacity to see a language and try to find rules. Okay, so this is how it works. This is how the verbs in this language work. Whether it's a language to have feminine and masculine words, how they have to combine. So this ability to find rules, plus memory capacity. So they will say that the aptitude depends on these three main variables. And just here one note: aptitude correlates positively with social class and parental education. So it's something that we should know. What about motivation? Aptitude and motivation seem to be the best predictors for success. But we have to consider that motivation is something that is a construct that is not stable. It's something that keeps changing. Sometimes we think, okay, I'm motivated to learn a language. So I'm going to learn Korean. But if you just think that that's it, no. We have to pay attention to different aspects of it. For example, let's say I say I'm going to study Korean. I say Korean, so Korean. Things that can affect my motivation. So things can change my motivation or affect my motivation will be: do I have the time? Do I like Korean people? Do I want to interact with Korean people? Do I have the money to have a Korean teacher? So you see, all this is going to really affect your motivation. Motivation is not something that I want to do it. It's something that keeps changing according to different factors. Now imagine I'm studying Korean. So what is maintaining my motivation? Probably things like I'm having fun in class, are my classmates nice to me, is the teacher good, is the materials good, is easy for me. So you see, all these are going to change your motivation. And eventually, whether or not you're going to continue with the next step. Let's say you finish your first Korean level, what is going to determine that you continue with Korean? So many things could be that the grades you obtained, your self-appraisal of how you did, your biases, or I fail because the teacher, or I fail because I'm so bad, or I'm worthless, you see? So all these things are going to affect your motivation. So motivation is not a construct, it's not one thing, it can be affected by many things. And here I wrote one author, if you're interested in motivation and second language learning, he is studying this area of motivation and see which factors affect learning. The next one is affect. So your self-esteem, let's say, for example, somebody who goes overseas to study a particular language, and it happens that people make fun of the accent, or people have not the patience to listen to this person trying to communicate. This may affect your self-esteem, and obviously it's going to probably deter you to continue studying it. Or the other way, you may be very competitive, and you say, no, there's no way, I have to learn it, and I have to learn it well. Okay? Social anxiety may affect. If obviously you have anxiety to speak in public, probably your speaking abilities will not be eventually good. Acculturation, that means some people who go to another country and they don't learn the language because they don't feel identified with that language or that people. So obviously these people will not learn the language because they don't feel it's something positive. And the opposite, if you are open to new cultures and you're a risk seeker, you don't care even if I make mistakes, I just speak, whatever. I mean, everybody makes mistakes, I'm sure they would understand me. If you're like that, probably you will learn faster. And finally, learning strategies. This means what the strategies is the person using in order to learn a new language. So children or adults who are able to compare in forms with previous material, relate new things with all things that they have learned before. If they group information, like for example, I put here the verbs, and in this page the adverbs, and then here the English idioms, and then I put it in different color, the irregular verbs in this color. These people, in general, will be very good at memorizing and eventually learn the language. So repetition, memorization, important. People who set goals for themselves, search for more input. Let's say I'm going to listen or watch the movies in the original version in French if I'm learning French. If I modify the input, that means okay, I'm going to listen to French music, and every time I don't understand something, I just stop and then I try to understand. And you know, if you are able to do all these things, obviously you are going to learn much faster. And again here, another author for you if you are interested about learning strategies. Remember, learning strategies is about learning how to learn. So this author, what he did was a meta-analysis. Meta-analysis means he collected many data from different studies to see whether or not, if you teach how to learn to your students, whether this will be useful. And guess what? He found that it's not very useful. It is quite surprising. So he said that teaching how to learn for a language is not really effective. He said, if anything is effective, is to teach how to learn vocabulary, how to teach reading strategies, and how to read speaking strategies. And then thinking of that, I thought of my own experience. Like I remember when we had to do these exams in English, there's a moment that you have to talk, right? So the teacher always teaches all these tricks, like you just say something like this, seems like you're very clever, like, wait a moment, please. It's on the tip of my tongue. You know, so it sounds like you really know, but it's just, you know, like, but you don't know. Basically, you are, you know, wasting time in order to see what you can come up with. So, as I said, it seems that these strategies may be useful for speaking, for reading, for learning vocabulary, and not useful at all for writing, unfortunately, for writing and listening skills. They say that teaching how to teach these things is very difficult. So the conclusion for this part is that age, aptitude, motivation, affect, and learning strategies interact during the process of second language acquisition. And I would like to thank all of you for being here today and being for so long. GCU Singapore for sponsoring some of the studies that I'm doing at this moment, and all my collaborators, Shakti, Smart, Jonathan, Rachel, Sokwe, Shalini, Kathy, Kimberly, Yedway, and Sabrina. Thank you.
I have a question. Please don't think that's okay. Okay, my question is, first of all, strategies that lecturers, well, I've got two things. Strategies that lecturers have when students ask a question and they want to delay it. That's a very interesting question. And that's their way of going, heck, how do I answer this?
Yeah, this is what I'm doing now.
Oh, no, it's good. But, okay, I have a friend, two friends. He's German, she's from Hungary. They have a baby. When I went round to see them for supper one night, they gave me strict instructions that I had to speak to Leah in English, Mum had to speak to Leah in Hungarian, Dad had to speak to Leah in German, right? Mm-hmm. However, Mum and Dad spoke to each other in German, but they then spoke to me in English, right? So what on earth is going through that poor child's head? I mean, you know, because one of the things you said was that they might have fabulous ability to speak all and read all languages, but then again, one or two of the languages could suffer. I mean, suffer might be too strong a word, but
no,
so
yeah.
You know, so there's three things going on from three different faces, and you know, I was thinking any minute this child is going to freak out. You know,
Okay,
but she was just wide-eyed like this, listening to everything.
What will happen, actually, this is really good, because we know that during the first months, I don't know how old is Leah.
Leah's just about to be 1.
Okay, so we know that the first 6 months are critical. The more languages you expose the child, the more abilities to discriminate sounds. After 1 year, all these abilities are gone completely. So if the child is exposed to different sounds in different languages, eventually we'll be able to differentiate. So we know that for us it's very difficult to discriminate Chinese tones, right? Because we have not been exposed to tones. But if we had been exposed to tones since birth, probably now we will be very good at discriminating. Let me finish with this question. The idea is that if you keep talking to this, like the mom speaks Hungarian, the daddy speaks German, and is consistent, and the child eventually has like a circle of Hungarian kids, a circle of German kids, the child will learn both languages, and obviously will learn English because he's in Singapore, right? He's the person in Singapore. So we'll learn eventually English in the school. So this will be the ideal. The problem will be that the child, there will be a moment that she sees that they both speak German. So maybe she will tend to, she knows that she will talk maybe in German because she knows that the mother understands German. So it may happen that the child chooses German because he knows anyway they understand it. So usually what you recommend is to have this big circle of people who speak your own language.
Can I just add, what about accents? Because I'm from the north of England, and if I was to talk to you in my native Northern English accent, I can guarantee nobody would be able to understand me.
I also don't understand you sometimes.
You're like, what are you saying? How long have we worked together? So if you think about, say, a Scottish accent, a broad Scottish accent, and then you've got a broad Texan accent, how will the child deal with, it's the same language, technically?
Yeah, no, it will be exactly the same. It will do exactly the same. But if he grew up in, let's say, in another area, he will probably catch up the area because anyway the parents will understand. So, yeah.
Just now you showed the curve regarding age acquisition for the language. Okay. You are studying the group on non-linguistic group of people from China and Korea migrated to US.
Yes.
How about, you mentioned earlier regarding for those with bilingualism basic and they learn a third language will be easier.
Yes.
So how does this age factor interact with bilingualism group of people? Do they respond similarly, or do they respond?
I think they will do. I think they will do similarly, in the sense that if you have two languages from birth, probably it will be easier for you to learn a third language.
But the age factor will have no difference with a bilingualism group of people with a bilingualism background. Is there any difference when they respond to the age? Because you mentioned that it will be easier for them to adopt a third language in the presentation, but you never mentioned that with a bilingualism background, the age, let's say when they pick up a third language at a later age, but the bilingualism background will help them to adopt better.
Yeah, as compared to a monolingual, I would agree that this would be the case. I'm not sure, but
the study that comprise bilingualism group of people.
Yeah, the study doesn't show it, but I would agree with you that if the person had learned both languages very early, probably will facilitate much better than if you learn one, and then another one, and then another one in time.
My second question to you is, in Singapore, is a pioneer in using second language to teach mother tongue. I think you heard of that. It's the first pioneer experimental stage in the world. Why did you try that? So how do you foresee this using a foreign language to teach a mother tongue? In terms of bilingualism and how early the age factor comes in, how do you see this educational policy? How do you look at it? Will it be confusing to the child, or will it develop a better, like you mentioned about linguistic awareness, mental flexibility, conceptual formation skill, all this? How do you look at this issue about using a foreign language, second language, or using English to teach a mother tongue, that thing? A foreign language to teach a mother tongue?
Or using English to teach
a mother tongue in the Singapore secondary school, Singapore educational system context. Now they are using a foreign language, English, to teach a mother tongue, that thing.
I didn't know that. I mean, I understand that they teach Chinese with Chinese speakers.
because now the under Singapore context
Maybe
is
things have changed.
very young child, very young, has been taken care of by a maid or an English-speaking environment. They grew up in an English-speaking environment because both parents are working. But in terms of the racial difference, Chinese usually the weakest in the mother tongue because highest percentage of both parents working. So most of the Chinese, in terms of ratio, generally Chinese, Indian, and then Malay. Malay has most of their as a housewife, the wife is still at home taking care of the kids, so they still impart the mother tongue skill. But for the Chinese, generally is the weakest among the three racial groups. So how do you perceive in this using foreign language to teach mother tongue? Have you ever come across any research thing?
No, because I understood that they learn Chinese. What I read so far is that they do like they have like sometimes two teachers, and then one teacher speaks on English, the other only teach Chinese, and then from there they learn. The English teacher doesn't teach Chinese; it's only English, and the Chinese teacher will only talk to the child in Chinese. But I may be wrong. Okay, maybe some others who have gone through the system.
I don't think you see it in school. You see it more during like when you're giving tuition, when you're trying to explain to children, like maybe they are stronger in a particular language. So you're using the concept from you're using concepts from English.
In my opinion, I think when something is not really understood, in my opinion, I think you should explain whatever you can and then move on and continue talking in Chinese. But if there's no way that the child could understand by speaking in Chinese, you know what I mean? So just go tell him what it is and then move on. This is my own opinion.
But in a bilingualism context, do you actually encourage to practice? You have to be stronger in the mother tongue. It means when you adopt a bilingual environment, but your mother tongue must start slightly earlier, and you have a stronger foundation in mother tongue before you pick up a second language, or they go hand in hand at the same age now. Because you never mentioned about whether this bilingualism should be exposed to the same age, or should the mother tongue be started a bit earlier and have a better or stronger foundation, then they start.
It depends if the mother tongue is the tongue that the parents speak. If let's say the mother speaks Chinese and comes from Chinese family, it's completely fine, but the mother speaks Chinese and the father maybe speaks English because he speaks English. So it's completely good that they both. But if, let's say, the father doesn't speak English well, but you want to force it, it's also not a very good idea, because it's better that you have a good role model.
Okay, I've got one last question for you. Regarding, you mentioned about bilingualism and intelligence. But you mentioned about the different aspect of the test performed for English, Tamil, English, Malay, the different group, the response in different capacity, like linguistic awareness, concept formation, mental flexibility, all these things.
Well,
okay,
this was not for the Malay groups, this was for English,
some
French.
Some sort of, you compare the different group and those monolingualism, okay. But in terms of intelligence, in the sense of IQ or EQ tests, do they actually perform, your study, do they actually perform certain EQ and IQ tests so that their overall average, academic performance, whether they pick up bilingualism, how early they pick up, and any differences in the academic performance when they have this bilingualism, English, Mandarin, or different group, do you actually study in their EQ or IQ tests being conducted on these different groups?
No, because I'm not measuring intelligence. I'm measuring only visual spatial capacity.
Yeah,
so it's not really intelligence. It's a small aspect of it.
Oh, a small aspect of it.
It's a very small aspect of it.
So there's no direct influence whether this bilingualism of different languages, two languages in whatever another different context, how early it has been imparted to the child or whatever. The EQ and IQ test has not been performed so far. Whether this really affect their overall academic performance. But okay, when they are very strong in the language, in both bilingual, generally do they perform better in other academic, other science, maths or whatever? Is there any link?
I have no study that, so I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. But ideally will be, but we don't know. Sorry, Abhi will info sorry.
So I have two comments to make. Firstly, regarding your study. So a large part of your presentation is a review. So that's fine. and then you have your study in the middle. Now in your study, I can see that you don't have a socio-cultural context. You have, so it's fine, it's taken from a psychology perspective. And towards the end, you do mention a few variables like mother's occupation, father's occupation, and so on. You know, so I mean, my concern is that in a study like this, separating the socio-cultural context from any of the variables that you're looking at, is, you know, it doesn't quite work. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I just wanted to share with you some research that we are doing at the Office of Education Research, and some of my colleagues are here. So we are actually looking at 3 classes. We are looking at the Chinese classes, the Malay mother tongue classes, and the learning support program, which are English classes. And we are looking at how the English teacher can use mother tongue to teach grammar, how the Chinese teacher can use English to teach Chinese, and how the Malay teacher can use English to teach Malay. So we have 3 data sets. So, and one of the things that, so I'll just give you one example, like, so we are looking at possessives. So a lot of children in Singapore will say, my mother room, or my sister book. They leave out the possessive. And we discover that one of the reasons that Chinese children might do it is because in Chinese, the possessive is actually a separate word. It's like a D-E or D-E. Now, I'm not a Chinese speaker, of course, but so we try to create this meta-linguistic awareness in which we showed the children that, okay, in Chinese, you know, these are 2 separate words, and in English, you've got to put them together.
As well as to contrast
to
this awareness.
Yeah, so that's meta-linguistic awareness and also metacognition. And in Malay actually doesn't have a possessive. No, it's not a separate, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not a separate morpheme or something that is attached. And Tamil, of course, is very complicated. It depends on the way the noun is structured. In some cases, it appears, in some cases, it's contextual. So, so I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is the measurement of language transfer is something that is totally new, and I can see that you haven't gone there yet. And what you've shown is very interesting, but I feel that if you want to add something new to the literature, I mean, so what you found is that the Chinese children do better, right? Which is fine. So it's always nice to see something new which is coming out. And one of the things that I'm wondering, you know, one can think about is how do you measure language transfer, and how do you document it? That, okay, Mandarin, English people will learn possessives in this way, take that much time, and it's different for this language group and that language group. And I think that in the field of bilingualism and acquisition in terms of academic achievement, these would be the more important things for teaching and learning. I mean, you know, we have a national school system.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so, well, that's just,
I completely agree with you. I mean, sometimes would be the psychologists or the psycholinguistic people will go into such a small detail that it's not.
Oh, your tasks, yeah, your tasks are very interesting. Did you invent all of those? Or, yeah. So that's good.
Michelle, did you have a question?
Actually, ma'am told about a child who is exposed to Hungarian language, German, and English. This may be a funny question. When that child can learn all the 3 languages perfectly, it's an innocent child. Maybe,
or maybe not.
Maybe. We people are very big, grown up, and we have a lot of knowledge and all those things. Why it's very difficult for us to learn a new language?
When we're older. Oh, sorry, what is the question?
A child can learn a language very easily, but why the grown-up people cannot learn?
Plasticity, it's a great plasticity you mentioned.
Yeah, this is one of the explanations that could be is that, you know, when you are born, your brain is like somehow like trying to see what I can learn. So how I have to work. So if you expose them to language, all these connections start happening and happening and happening. When you are an adult, all these connections are already formed. So to learn something sometimes is more difficult, particularly something like complex, like grammar, like language. It has a lot of rules inside. So one of the reasons could be this flexibility is lost. Yeah, that's why you say innocent in that sense, right? That he doesn't know anything.
So if I want to learn a new language, then what is the first step I have to take?
Decide which one. It doesn't mean, again, it's not impossible. As we see, some people can really learn great and be very good at speaking a foreign language. We see that aptitude and motivation were the most important factors also to learn. You can, I mean, everything is possible, but obviously you will approach as an adult is different way. You will have to use more like an explicit way of studying and repetition as compared to a small child. So we are very good at learning. We can learn quite fast as compared with a child, right? I mean, how is possible the child doesn't know how to do many things and still can learn language that is so complicated? Well, we are good at learning rules and things like that, but some other things that come more naturally, like language, like the accent, these are really difficult for us as an adult. So yeah, some things we can really learn good, some other things like accent are very difficult to change.
Does that mean once you reach past a certain age, when you pick up a new language, whatever you learn, you will forget easily? Whether you are exposed or not. Whether you are exposed to an environment with the language, to experience the language as in an environment that you can easily use the language.
Well, it's like the old adage, once you know how to learn a bike, you know, you might not go on a bicycle 10 years.
But you can still know.
When you get back on the bicycle, you might be a bit wobbly, but it just takes a bit of practice and you get back in. And going back to our friend's idea about learning a new language, it's a bit like wanting to get fit and healthy. You've got to train your body. So you've got to train your body, you've got to train your brain, and you've also got to have huge motivation. Do I want to lose 5 kilos because I've got to get into a wedding dress, or a posh frock, or a dinner jacket, or whatever? What's your motivation? What's the reason behind it? Do you want to learn how to speak Chinese because there's a cute girl in my class? Or, you know, I mean, see what I mean? What's your motivation?
Yes.
I just wonder, does a dominant language eventually emerges? I'm referring to the example quoted earlier. A Hungarian mother, a German father. I mean, assuming that they both the child is given equal attention to both languages. Does one language eventually emerges as the dominant language? I'm saying this also in Singapore's context. We do have parents from different ethnic groups, say within the Chinese community, Cantonese from that part of China and one from another part of China, and they speak very different, dialects. So when a child belonging to a father from Cantonese or even Japanese, I just wonder what kind of studies or researchers have shown or are being carried out showing eventually, let's say in the European context, does one language eventually dominate?
It will dominate, I think, depend on how the child sees how useful is that language. So let's say the mom is French and the father speaks English in America, in US. So probably the child will become stronger eventually, even if he takes French class as well, because the environment supports much better.
Macro environment is the critical role.
I have to quote a very, very interesting study, okay, the Social Linguistic Survey Singapore, and that's just reminded me, you basically said about how useful the language is, okay. This particular study looked at the language that a child uses with different groups of its family, and I think something was found out that a child will be far more likely to use the grandparents' dialect if it means getting something from Nan and Grandad.
So, I think I can answer in a better manner this question. Okay. There's a proverb. Necessity is the mother of invention. So the child feels it is necessary for him or her to learn German to speak to his father, and it is necessary for her to learn Hungarian to speak to her mother. That is the necessity. Because of the necessity, it's able to to absorb it in a better manner. And as you said, the environment also plays a major role. And in my own family, there is a best example, better example. My mother, she doesn't know English. Okay. So my father was in Air Force. So we were posted in North India. See, there is Hindi-speaking people. Okay. And because from Air Force, different state people will be residing there. Yeah. Okay, different languages. We have Telugu, Tamil, Malayalam, Kannada. South Indian languages itself, there are four different. And again Gujarati, so many things. So just because my mother, although she is an adult, she was an adult, she had the necessity to communicate with the neighbors. So she learned so many languages in spite of being an adult. So that's only the basic thing is necessity. If there is any necessity, supposing I say I will pay you $1 million for your job. If you go for a French company, you learn French, you will learn. So understand?
Necessity is one thing, and as I said, the language has to be nourished. And also, it has to be, like I said, the person that will stop. Let's say the child, the situation where the mother is French and the father is English. The child will stop speaking French for sure, unless has a big French community supporting, or grandparents, or traveling to France, something that supports that. Otherwise, we are lazy. And so we see what is useful, and then we change that. The child cannot understand.
We won't have the tendency to do it.
Yeah, that's it.
Are there any other questions? Yeah, we'll take one last question.
Are there any strategies for us for adults to learn a new language rather quickly?
Quickly.
Yeah, is it language dependent?
I mean, you have to put effort. Okay, so we saw, if you have good aptitude for language, that's a plus. If you have motivation, it's a plus. And then if you have good memory, it's another plus. So there's no shortcut.
Like will learning the grammar, the grammatic structure help us
Practice.
learn the language faster?
Okay, I'm trying to learn a bit of Mandarin, simply so that, my most useful phrase thus far to uncles on bicycles on pavements has been 请接过. Basically, can you move out the way as they're doing this while I'm trying to go jogging? And it's necessity, correct?
Correct.
Okay. But it's necessity, and it's also not minding standing up in a room full of complete strangers and saying 请接过 or 谢谢你 or 不用谢谢 or whatever. It's thinking, do I look like an idiot? Well, everybody's giggling, so either I'm getting it completely wrong or I'm getting it completely right and everybody's surprised. So it's that having a go.
So just to wrap up, actually, I know this question has to do with many theories on how you should teach language. There are different theories. Some of the theories say that you should just give talk to the person a lot before even the person talks to you back. Some of the theories will say that what you have to do is, instead of talking is to teach the rules first. So different perspectives, there are many different schools of thought on how it should be taught. There's no one real answer for that. But definitely it's about motivation, aptitude, and your own work, right? But yes, it's true, there's different points of view on how you should teach. There are different ones.
So I think what we'll ask is perhaps, yeah, the researcher.
Yeah. Yeah, same. No, we found the same capacity for. Okay, so yeah, I understand why. Because you just said that alphabetic languages promote more phonological awareness. All the studies, some of the studies that have been done in the US with Ricardo Leal, they show that this phonological advantage that English Malay children have is only when they are very young. So it seems that this Malay helps with the learning of English, English helps with the learning of Malay, but the English Chinese kids catch up very fast. So when they're slightly older, they already have the same phonological awareness capacity. So obviously with adults, I didn't find differences. You have to think that with the good thing of the English Chinese, that they have two systems and English will promote this phonological awareness. So they may use the English skills in order to process language maybe, and then they use all these logographic skills in order to capture interactions. In this experiment, adults, all university students, and although you are right, all these socio-economical things we should take into account, it was quite homogeneous. Although for this study, 41 Chinese speakers, 40 Malay, and 31 Tamil. So it's still small, we need more data. The problem again to find Tamil speakers, so sometimes it's not the same kind of sample. So the Chinese speakers, we can get it all from the same school, but Tamil speakers we need to get from here and there, so they may be a slightly different background, but it's still Singapore, you cannot believe it's not so different, and the age are similar.
Maybe you can also look at the outliers, you know, like if you look at the phonological awareness that does not work with Malay and English speakers, for instance, D and D. There's interference there, there's no transfer there. That's a very interesting phonic thing. You know, how is it that Malay speakers often say mother instead of mother? I mean, they're both alphabetic languages, but that's not transferred. So it's always you can look at those exceptions.
Yeah, this is a thing that you can look and get another study. Yeah, yes, thank you.
Okay, well, I think if anybody wants to ask Lydia any more, maybe they'd like to take her email address if you're not already one of her students or work with her. And I would very much like to thank Lydia for this. This has been fabulous.